mist clings tightly to the Grampian Mountains in Scotland before rolling down into the valley of Strathmore, where a fortress stands tall. This is Glamis Castle, and it is a place of breathtaking beauty mixed with suffocating dread. The red sandstone walls rise like a beacon of blood against the gray sky, while turrets pierce the clouds like jagged teeth. Inside these walls lie secrets that have been whispered for centuries among the locals. It is said that every stone holds a memory, and every shadow hides a ghost. The silence here is heavy, and it presses against the ears of those who dare to enter. Something ancient and malevolent watches from the high windows. Located in the region of Angus, this structure has a history that stretches back to the 14th century. It has served as a royal residence and a fortress against enemies, both foreign and domestic. The architecture itself seems designed to confuse and intimidate the visitor. There are secret passages hidden behind tapestries and staircases that lead to nowhere. The walls are excessively thick in places, suggesting that they conceal hollow spaces. It is a building that feels alive, as if the stone breathes in the cold Scottish air. The sheer scale of the castle dwarfs any human presence, making one feel insignificant and vulnerable to the unseen forces within. Glamis Castle is famous worldwide as the childhood home of Elizabeth Bowes Lyon, who would become the Queen Mother. It was also the birthplace of Princess Margaret, making it a site of immense royal significance. Yet beneath the veneer of royal pageantry and noble heritage lies a darkness that no amount of gold or velvet can hide. The bright laughter of royal children has always echoed alongside the phantom screams of the tortured. It is a place of stark contrasts, where the light of the monarchy meets the absolute blackness of a cursed lineage. The family has guarded their secrets well, but the dead do not keep silent forever. The most chilling legend associated with this place is that of the Monster of Glamis. This story dates back to the early 19th century and involves the rightful heir to the earldom. It is said that the first son of the 11th Earl was born terribly malformed. The child was described as having a chest like a barrel and limbs that were twisted and hairy. The family was horrified by his appearance and made a dark decision to hide him away. They announced to the public that the child had died shortly after birth. A coffin was buried, but it was filled only with stones, while the child remained alive within the castle. The existence of this hidden child became the terrible secret of the Bowes Lyon family. A secret chamber was constructed deep within the thick walls of the castle, known only to the Earl and his heir. This room had no windows and no doors that could be seen from the outside. The monster child was locked inside this stone prison and fed through a sliding panel. He grew up in absolute darkness, never seeing the light of the sun or the face of another human being. The servants whispered of strange noises coming from behind the walls during the dead of night. They heard heavy footsteps and guttural growls that sounded barely human. Generations of guests have tried to find the location of this secret room. There is a famous story of a party of visitors who decided to hang towels from every window in the castle. They went outside to look at the facade and count the towels to match them with the rooms. To their horror, they discovered one window high up in the tower that had no towel hanging from it. When they rushed back inside to find the room corresponding to that window, they found only solid stone walls. The Earl discovered their game and became furious, ordering them to leave immediately. The secret was safe, but the knowledge of the hidden room remained. The creature is said to have lived for a shockingly long time, perhaps surviving well over 100 years. Some legends say he possessed supernatural strength and could crush iron with his bare hands. As he grew older, his rage intensified, and his screams would echo through the stone corridors. The family could do nothing but wait for him to die, yet he seemed immortal. He would pace his cell endlessly, wearing a groove into the stone floor. It represents a lifetime of torture and isolation that surely left a stain on the atmosphere. The sheer misery of such an existence is enough to bind a spirit to a place forever. Another dark figure haunts the halls of Glamis Castle, and he is known as Earl Beardie. His real name was Alexander Lindsay, and he was the 4th Earl of Crawford. He was a cruel and vicious man who was known for his love of gambling and alcohol. One stormy Saturday night, he was playing cards with his friends in a high chamber. The game was intense, and the stakes were high as the storm raged outside. As the clock approached midnight, a servant entered the room to remind the Earl that the Sabbath was approaching. Playing cards on the Lord's Day was considered a grave sin in those religious times. Earl Beardie was drunk and enraged by the interruption from his servant. He threw the man out of the room and declared that he would keep playing cards. His friends became uneasy as the clock struck 12, and they urged him to stop the game. The Earl laughed in their faces and shouted that he would play until doomsday if he wished. He challenged anyone to play with him, even the devil himself. At that precise moment, a loud knock thundered against the heavy oak door of the chamber. The room went cold, and the candles flickered violently as the door slowly creaked open. Standing in the doorway was a tall stranger wrapped in a long dark cloak. He did not speak, but simply nodded at the empty chair opposite the Earl. Earl Beardie welcomed the stranger, and they began to play cards as the other guests fled in terror. The servants listening outside heard the Earl swearing and shouting with excitement. Then they heard a terrifying scream that chilled their blood, followed by a deafening clap of thunder. When they finally built up the courage to enter the room, it was empty. Both the Earl and the stranger had vanished, leaving only the smell of brimstone and scorch marks on the floor. It is believed that the stranger was indeed Satan, who had accepted the challenge. Earl Beardie had gambled his soul and lost it in that high tower room. Now he is condemned to play cards until the end of time in a secret room within the castle. Guests sleeping in the adjacent bedrooms often report hearing the sound of dice rattling and men swearing. The sounds are distinct and unmistakable, coming from behind the solid walls. It is a perpetual loop of damnation, playing out night after night. The Earl got his wish to play until doomsday, but the price was an eternity of torment. The history of Glamis is also stained with the tragic tale of Janet Douglas, who was Lady Glamis. She lived during the 16th century and became a target of King James V. The king held a deep hatred for the Douglas family and sought to destroy them by any means necessary. Since he could not find a legitimate legal reason to execute her, he fabricated a charge of witchcraft. He accused her of trying to poison him and of using dark magic to harm the royal line. It was a time when such accusations were a death sentence, and no amount of innocence could save her. Lady Janet was imprisoned in the dark dungeons of Edinburgh Castle, while her servants were tortured for evidence. Eventually, the king secured a false confession and condemned her to a horrific death. On July 17th, in the year 1537, she was burned alive at the stake on Castle Hill. Her young son was forced to watch his mother perish in the flames. She died with great dignity and courage, which only shamed her accusers further. But death was not the end for Lady Janet Douglas. Her spirit returned to the place she loved most, and she became the Grey Lady of Glamis Castle. The Grey Lady is most frequently seen in the family chapel within the castle. Visitors and family members alike have reported seeing a translucent figure kneeling in prayer. She always occupies the same seat, which is still reserved for her to this day. No one is allowed to sit in the corner chair of the chapel out of respect and fear. Witnesses describe an overwhelming feeling of sadness when she is present. The air turns icy cold, and the smell of smoke sometimes lingers in the chapel. She is a figure of tragedy, rather than malice, representing the injustice she suffered in life. There are other more grotesque specters that roam the grounds of this ancient fortress. One such figure is known as the woman without a tongue. Sightings of this ghost describe a woman running through the parkland surrounding the castle. She appears terrified and frantically points to her open mouth, revealing a gaping void. Legend says she was a maid who stumbled upon the secret of the Monster of Glamis. To ensure her silence, the family had her tongue cut out, and she was forced to live in agony. She eventually died of her injuries, or perhaps from the sheer trauma of the mutilation. Her ghost is a gruesome reminder of the lengths the family went to protect their secrets. She appears with blood staining her chin and madness in her eyes. Those who encounter her feel an intense wave of panic and the urge to flee. She tries to speak, but only a gurgling sound emerges from her throat. It is a horrifying encounter that leaves witnesses shaken for days afterwards. She is trapped in the moment of her silencing, unable to tell the world what she saw. Her existence is a testament to the brutality that often accompanied power in the past. The literary world also connects Glamis Castle to dark deeds through William Shakespeare. In his play Macbeth, the title character is the Thane of Glamis. The play features the murder of King Duncan, which Shakespeare set at this very castle. While the real King Duncan died in battle, the association with murder clings to the stones. Guests often ask to see the room where Duncan was killed, blurring the lines between fiction and reality. The power of the story has created a kind of psychic imprint on the castle. It is as if the fictional violence has fed the real evil residing there. Another legend speaks of a vampire that was once a servant within the castle walls. The story goes that a woman was caught drinking the blood of a guest. The family, believing she was a creature of the night, decided to wall her up alive. This was a common method of dealing with problems at Glamis, burying them behind brick and mortar. She was sealed into a small alcove and left to dehydrate and starve in the dark. It is said that she managed to survive for weeks, scratching at the stone until her fingers were raw. Her spirit is said to be particularly malevolent and hungry. Not all the ghosts at Glamis are ancient or royal figures. There is the tale of a small boy servant who was mistreated in the 18th century. He was often made to sit on a stone seat by the door to wait for his master. One night, the cold was so severe that he froze to death while waiting on the bench. He is now seen as a small, sad figure huddled in the corner near the Queen Mother's sitting room. He does not interact with the living, but simply waits for a master who will never come. His presence adds a layer of melancholy to the otherwise terrifying atmosphere. There is also the story of Jack the Runner, a more aggressive spirit. He is described as a tall, thin man who sprints through the corridors at night. Guests have reported seeing a blur of motion, followed by a gust of wind. He seems to be fleeing from something, or perhaps chasing an unseen victim. His footsteps are loud and frantic, echoing on the wooden floorboards. No one knows his origin or why he is running, but his energy is chaotic. He disrupts the stillness of the night and wakes guests from their slumber with his phantom sprinting. The current residents and staff of Glamis Castle treat these legends with a serious respect. They know better than to mock the stories or wander the dark halls alone. The Queen Mother herself rarely spoke of the ghosts, but she never denied them. There is a famous account of her seeing a figure while she was writing letters. The figure moved across the room and vanished through a closed door. She simply continued writing, accepting the supernatural as part of daily life at Glamis. It speaks to the pervasive nature of the hauntings, that they are considered normal. The crypt underneath the castle provides the most oppressive atmosphere of all. It is a low, arched space that feels crushed by the weight of the stone above. This area was once used as a dining hall for the lower servants and soldiers. Visitors here often report feeling nauseous or dizzy, as if the air is too thick to breathe. There are reports of a man in armor standing in the shadows, watching the tourists. He stands perfectly still until you look away, and then he moves closer. The feeling of being hunted is palpable in the crypt. One of the most disturbing modern encounters involves a guest staying in the Blue Room. He woke up in the middle of the night to feel hands around his throat. He struggled against the invisible attacker, gasping for air in the darkness. As he reached for the lamp, the pressure suddenly released, and he heard a soft laugh. There were red marks on his neck. The next morning, proving it was not a nightmare, he left the castle that very day, refusing to ever return. This aggressive behavior suggests that some spirits here are far from dormant. The architecture of the roof is known as the Mad Earl's Walk. It is a dangerous path along the high battlements with a sheer drop to the courtyard. It is named after an earl who would pace there during storms, screaming at the heavens. Some say he was possessed by the spirits of the castle and driven to madness. On windy nights, people claim to see a figure silhouetted against the moon, walking the edge. He defies gravity and the slick, wet stones moving with an unnatural gait. It is a visual reminder of the madness that seems to infect the bloodline. The sheer number of windows in the castle has always been a source of unease. From the outside, one can count dozens of windows that do not seem to have corresponding rooms. This reinforces the theory of multiple secret chambers hidden within the structure. What else is hidden in those voids besides the Monster of Glamis? Could there be other prisoners who were walled up and forgotten? The thought of hollow spaces filled with ancient bones is enough to keep anyone awake. The castle is like a puzzle box designed to keep its contents trapped inside. A former butler of the castle shared a story of a spectral encounter in the main hall. He was polishing the silver when he saw a lady in a gray dress descend the stairs. He assumed she was a guest and asked if she needed assistance. She walked right past him without a sound and dissolved into the wall. He later identified her from a portrait as a family member who had died centuries ago. The casual nature of the appearance was what frightened him the most. It was as if the dead and the living were sharing the same space. There are tales of children visiting the castle who see things adults cannot. A young girl once pointed to an empty chair and asked why the sad man was crying. Her parents saw nothing, but the girl insisted the man was bleeding from his chest. She described his old-fashioned clothing in perfect detail despite knowing nothing of history. Children often refuse to enter certain rooms, claiming they are too scary or hot. Their innocence seems to peel back the veil that hides the spirit world. It serves as a chilling validation of the legends. The atmosphere in the hangman's chamber is particularly vile. It is named because the last man to sleep there hanged himself from the rafters. The room has a depressive quality that weighs down on anyone who enters. It is said that the rope is sometimes visible, swinging gently in the still air. Guests who have attempted to spend the night there often leave before dawn. They report overwhelming feelings of despair and suicidal thoughts that are not their own. The room acts as a psychic echo chamber of the tragedy that occurred there. The Duncan Hall is another focal point for paranormal activity. Despite the historical inaccuracy of the name, the room holds a dark energy. The floorboards creak rhythmically, as if someone is pacing back and forth. Cold spots move around the room like sentient pockets of freezing air. Security guards have reported their flashlights dying instantly when they enter this hall. Dogs refuse to cross the threshold and will whine and cower at the door. Animals sense the predator that lurks in the unseen dimensions of the room. The legend of the vampires of Glamis is not limited to the walled-up woman. There are stories of a male vampire who preyed upon the servants in the Victorian era. He was a guest who never seemed to age and only came out at night. Servants began to grow pale and weak, suffering from unexplained anemia. When the family suspected the truth, they drove him out into the sunlight where he burned. This story sounds like fiction, but the local records show a spike in mysterious deaths. It adds a gothic horror element to the Scottish ghost stories. The grounds of the castle are just as haunted as the interior. The Italian garden is a beautiful formal garden that hides a dark past. It is said to be the spot where a duel took place between two lovers. Both men died of their wounds, and their blood soaked into the soil. Gardeners report seeing two shadowy figures lunging at each other in the mist. The sound of clashing steel is sometimes heard on quiet mornings. The violence of their death has imprinted itself on the landscape, looping forever. There is a persistent sound heard throughout the castle, known as the hollow knock. It is 3 distinct raps on wood that seem to come from inside the walls. It is never heard on a door, but always on the paneling or the floor. Legend says this is the monster of Glamis signaling that he is still there. It is a communication from the void, a reminder of the secret sin. Those who hear it are said to be marked for bad luck. It is a sound that signals you are not alone in the room. The psychological impact of Glamis Castle is undeniable. It wears down the defenses of the rational mind with its oppressive atmosphere. The sheer weight of history and tragedy creates a psychic pressure. Visitors often leave feeling drained or emotionally exhausted. It is as if the castle feeds on the energy of the living to sustain the dead. The stone acts as a battery, storing the emotions of centuries. This energy is then released in the form of poltergeist activity and manifestations. During the Second World War, the castle was used as a military hospital. Soldiers recovering, there reported many strange occurrences. They would see nurses in old-fashioned uniforms who would vanish when approached. Wounded men would wake up to find their bandages had been changed by invisible hands. While some spirits seemed benevolent, others were terrifying. One soldier claimed a dark shadow tried to smother him with his pillow. The war brought death closer to the surface, amplifying the activity. The clock tower holds a mystery of its own. The clock has been known to chime 13 times at midnight. This phenomenon usually precedes a death in the family or a national tragedy. The mechanics have been checked repeatedly, but no fault is ever found. It is a supernatural harbinger of doom that the locals fear. When the clock strikes 13, the village falls silent, waiting for the bad news. It is the castle announcing its connection to the fate of the land. There is a room called the King Malcolm Room, which commemorates an ancient king. It is said that the floor stain in this room cannot be scrubbed away. It is believed to be the blood of a murdered man that rises to the surface. Cleaners have replaced the floorboards, but the stain always returns in the same spot. It is a stubborn reminder of a violence that refuses to be forgotten. The blood cries out from the ground, demanding justice that never came. It is a permanent scar on the castle. The confrontation with the supernatural at Glamis is rarely a visual one at first. It begins with a feeling of being watched by 1,000 eyes. The hair on the back of your neck stands up and the air grows heavy. Then comes the drop in temperature that chills you to the bone. Only then do the shadows begin to move and take shape. It is a gradual escalation of terror that breaks the will. The spirits here enjoy the fear they generate. The final horror of Glamis is the realization that the past is never truly gone. The monster, the Earl, the Grey Lady, they are all still residents. They are not memories, but active participants in the life of the castle. The walls do not just contain them, they protect them. The castle was built to be a fortress, and it defends its ghosts. To enter Glamis is to step out of time and into their domain. You are the intruder, and they are the masters. As you leave the castle grounds and look back at the towering spires, the dread lingers. You can feel the gaze of the unseen watchers from the high windows. The mist rolls back in swallowing the red stone walls. You carry the cold of the castle with you long after you have gone. The stories of Glamis are not just legends, they are warnings. A warning that some secrets should never be uncovered, and some doors should never be opened. The darkness of Glamis waits for your return.